In this video, I want to share with you 5 things which it seems like no one really ever considers or talks about when talking about or thinking about or studying spiritual and or religious and or new agey kind of teachings or wisdom or what have you. And the first thing that most people don't really ever consider or realize is that perhaps the point of the teaching or the wisdom is functioning kind of like a joke. In that the point of a joke is not the joke, but the spontaneous laughter that you have inside of yourself. If someone has to explain it to you, then you kind of just fake laughter. You're like, oh, that's pretty funny. And sometimes people don't even realize that perhaps that's sometimes how different teachings are functioning. Number 2 thing that people don't really ever consider is the fact that some teachings, and perhaps many teachings, who knows, are written down or put out to basically prove that they can't be done or they can't be accomplished. So these first 2 are already kind of a doozy, because oftentimes we take things literally as humans, which leads us to point number 3 that few ever consider, and that is our own bias, our own baggage, our own limited perspective and point of view that we are bringing to the table. Because if our point of view and our perspective wasn't already kind of limited, then we probably wouldn't be seeking something to expand it or improve it or fix it. It's kind of how that goes. So sometimes what happens is we, as modern people, hear a teaching, put all of our stuff on top of it, but when in actuality, if we look back, maybe it's something totally different. Which leads us to number 4 thing that people rarely ever consider, and that is a combination of the 3 things into one, which is the cultural context from which that thing came from, the time period, who said it, why did they say it, why did that make sense, why did that make sense then, and the original language that it was translated from. For example, a lot of other languages are very different than English. Specifically, to use ancient Chinese, we have ancient, very classical Chinese characters, then we have the simplified characters. And then translating those into exact English things sometimes is frankly impossible. And other times is just grossly inaccurate, but that's just what happened. And one thing that people don't really realize on this, which is historically true, is that sacred texts and historical texts oftentimes go through many hands and many translations, and whoever has them puts their own spin on it, puts their own bias on it, adds things, subtracts things, takes things out, whatever. And when these things finally make their way into English, many of them were done originally by white, male, Christian missionaries. And finally, the 5th thing that not many people seem to consider or realize is that it's very common that if we found a text or a teaching, that perhaps that text or teaching could very likely have been either perhaps someone's notebook or journal that was found, and maybe it was just notes that made sense for them based on certain things. This is true of a lot of Chinese texts. People find it and say, oh, it's a sacred, it's an old text, when in actuality it's like someone's notebook. They're taking notes while they're doing a practice, which is an internal thing. And the other thing is that sometimes the teaching or the wisdom or lesson or whatever perhaps is just one thing that was given to one person for a specific reason or context. Because we have to really think, well, what was the context and the culture around that original person? How were things done? How were things put together? It probably wasn't that person going to, a stadium or a conference and speaking to however many thousands of people and then being at a table and selling products afterwards. It wasn't necessarily just this general huge thing that went out to everyone because it was good for them. was probably a bit more one-on-one and specific, because we all are very similar, but we're also very different. We all have different natures and different constitutions, different paths, different lessons that we have to learn. So certain things are only going to be appropriate for certain people, and other things not. Some people are over at this extreme, some people are at that extreme. So if we're over here, we want to get to here. It's a different path than the person over here that wants to get to here. Similar, but a little bit different. And when it comes down to really what counts, it's usually the details in the subtle nuances that can make a huge difference. And the last bonus thing that I want to add in is that sometimes when people are exposed to different systems, we have to realize is that these are all coming through humans, which have biases and limitations, preferences, likes and dislikes. So hopefully that's been helpful. That's 5 or 6 things which hopefully will give you some clarity and some things to ponder when you're reading books, when you're studying with people, and just give you more awareness to be a bit more empowered and ideally more conscious in your choices, because how you spend your time and energy is an important decision, because we only have so much of it. Too often it seems like people just take things literally at face value or put their own bias upon it. So anyways, thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel, like the video, share the video, post a comment, and I'll talk to you soon.